So, thank you all for being on this direct line. Over the next hour, the program will proceed in two parts. First, U.S. Ambassador Danielle Rubenstein will make a presentation and give you an overview of the investment climate and potential opportunities in Tunisia as we near the investment conference, Tunisia 2020, that will be here in Tunis November 29 and 30th. He will be followed by MCHEM Press, who will share the effort his organization have undertaken in support of the investment conference. We will then, it will be read out loud, and the ambassador or a member of the economic team will answer that question. Once again, thank you for your participation in the direct line. And before I turn it over to the ambassador, let me introduce the economic team here at the embassy. First, Economic Chief Catherine Kaiser. We have Commercial Specialist Sami Awadi, Commercial Assistant Zubaida Gam, and myself, Jacques Etienne. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jacques, and good morning, everybody. I would really like to thank all those who are joining us today, wherever they are in the United States. It's a bit of a rainy afternoon here in Tunis, but I hope the sun is shining wherever you are, whether you're in the middle of the country or the coast. And I do want to save plenty of time for questions, but before I did that, I wanted to, of course, run through some of the key issues that I think we should be looking at, and some of the key opportunities that I think all of you have here to pursue some good private sector opportunities in Tunisia. So I'm going to organize my talk this morning about some of the assets that Tunisia has, some key aspects of the U.S.-Tunisia relationship, and what we think here at the embassy are the best prospects, both for exporters as well as for potential investors. And as Jacques mentioned, we will also talk about the Tunisia 2020 Investment Conference, and Khalid Babu from the AmCham will get into that in more detail. First, I think a few facts and figures about Tunisia may be in order. It is a small country in terms of population, slightly more than 11 million people here in Tunisia, and the median age is 28 years. So Tunisia does have a bit of a youth bulge, not as much as some other developing countries, but that does provide a very large pool of talented labor from which companies both Tunisian and American can draw from. Perhaps most important is Tunisia's strategic location. On the Mediterranean, it serves as a gateway, whether to Southern Europe, to Sub-Saharan Africa, or to North Africa and the broader Middle East. And that is something that I think requires a lot of attention as people look at where they want to set up their operations. We'll talk about perhaps Libya a little bit later. And it is truly a remarkable country with a great history, 30 centuries of civilization. So for those who choose to do business here, they're doing so in a very rich environment. Let's talk a little bit about the country's economic, based on purchasing power, is a little bit more than $11,800, and in current prices is around $4,000 per capita. GDP growth is around 1.4%. That's a figure from the second quarter of this year. Inflation has dipped now under 4%. That's as of September. And unemployment is a little bit higher than 15%. Maybe stepping away a little bit from the facts and figures to what's happening here politically, because that does set the investment climate for all those thinking about doing business here in Tunisia. You cannot exaggerate how successful the democratic transition here has been in Tunisia. We put up on the board how the Economist described Tunisia when they awarded Tunisia its Country of the Year in 2015. But just to be brutally frank, Tunisia is the only one of the Arab countries, from the Arab Spring countries in 2011, that stayed on track, has had a revolution, has had a democratic transition, and that serves as an underpinning of stability for all those who do business here or who want to do business here. It has a secular government, and at the same time, Tunisia has successfully incorporated both secular and conservative elements in its politics through a series of coalition governments. And there's a very strong civil society here. People are free to speak their mind. They're free to be creative, and that, of course, is also very important for economic dynamism. In terms of the country's economic assets, it does have a really great location to serve as a platform vis-a-vis Europe, vis-a-vis Africa, and the Maghreb. And I think at this point I would just mention that regarding Libya, although many of us are focused on what Libya is currently experiencing in terms of instability, I know that there are many people on the call who have experience in the past doing business in Libya, and more importantly, are planning aggressively and strategically for the business they want to do in the future in Libya. And for those who are looking at Libya-related opportunities, Tunisia is probably the single best place to look at in terms of setting up your back office operations and availing yourself of a very talented labor pool in Tunisia, which has very, very long experience doing business in Tunisia, doing business in Libya. In terms of that workforce, it is technologically savvy, it's very skilled. There's a large and stable middle class here, and that provides a backbone in terms of those who want to sell in the marketplace here, and those who can be very, very talented, whether you're interested in manufacturing or whether you're interested in services. There's some decent infrastructure and port facilities, as well as multiple international airports, and Tunisia enjoys some very good market access around the world. They have a free trade agreement in goods with Europe, and Tunisia currently is negotiating an even deeper free trade agreement with the EU. Tunisia also has enhanced market access with several Arab countries, and it does have several agreements with the United States we'll get to in a minute. Stepping away a little bit from the economy towards the Tunisia in social terms, this is a strong and stable, well-grounded society. Women's rights are enshrined, they have been for several decades, and women's equality is enshrined in Tunisia's constitution. There's a very high literacy rate, and this well-educated Tunisian population and workforce is also multilingual. And again, that gives Tunisia a real comparative advantage as you look at both trade and investment opportunities. A very broad swath of the population, which of course is fluent in Arabic, fluent in French, and even English language capability is really starting to spread here. Now perhaps a little bit about the challenges here in Tunisia. Job creation is a major challenge right now and is a key focus of the current government led by Prime Minister Youssef Chahed. Unemployment is over 15%, and our Tunisian friends are looking at what can be done to try to create jobs. There is a lack of diversification in the economy. In the last several decades, Tunisia's economy was heavily focused on tourism and a few other sectors, but more importantly, our Tunisian friends recognize the need right now to diversify that economy, and that provides some opportunities. As important, our Tunisian colleagues are opening up their economy, and they have passed several key economic reforms recently, which aim to open up key areas of the country to broader participation, both foreign and domestic investment. At the same time, the Tunisians have modernized key parts of their legal and regulatory environment, and they are working to overcome some very deep disparities between the very developed coastal areas of the country and the interior. There has been some political fluidity here in Tunisia. For those of you who follow it closely, there has been a series of governments since the 2000 revolution, but I would note that as actually a factor of stability. It shows that Tunisians are able, using the democratic means that they have and its constitution, to have governments come in to try and pass key legislation and meet the needs of them and transitions of government. So I view that as a factor of stability. A little bit about the U.S.-Tunisia bilateral relationship on the business side. Just a little bit of history. We do have a double taxation treaty that goes back to 1985, and of course that's still in effect. We have a bilateral investment treaty in effect, that goes back to 1990. Perhaps more importantly, there's a Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, or TIFA, and that's been in effect since 2002. And most recently, we do have a Science and Technology Agreement in effect with Tunisia, and we signed that in 2014. And I would also add that all three key arms of the U.S. government, which aim specifically at enhancing business opportunities, are open for business here in Tunisia. That includes the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or OPIC, the United States Export-Import Bank, or EXIM, and the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, or TDA. All three are open for business. All three are committed to helping U.S. exporters and investors do business here. And specifically regarding OPIC, in the recent years, OPIC Investment has supported the Tunisia Credit Guarantee Facility, in partnership with Aman Bank, the Arab Tunisia Bank, and Tijari, and that facility is a $12.5 million facility. And separately, OPIC also guarantees up to $50 million in lending through that facility to expand credit to small and medium enterprises. And that facility is managed by the nonprofit Middle East Investment Initiative. Continuing on the U.S.-Tunisia bilateral relationship, U.S. foreign direct FDI flows since 1994 have now hit a total stock of $1.2 billion in U.S. direct investment, and about 80 U.S. firms currently operate in Tunisia. And those 80 companies employ more than 15,000 people. In terms of the trade figures, through August of 2016, so these are not complete year figures, U.S. exports to Tunisia came in at a little bit higher than $368 million, while Tunisia's exports to the United States crossed $280 million. And of course, we'd like to see those figures go up in both directions. In terms of the best prospects for U.S. exports, the team here at the embassy believes that there are several key areas that we all should look at. Information technology and telecoms is certainly at the top of that list. Energy and power generation equipment and systems are right up there. Healthcare equipment, franchising, safety and security field to that area, as well as transport and agribusiness. And on the flip side, in terms of investment, there is clearly some opportunities in hydrocarbons, and although Tunisia's hydrocarbons are perhaps not as appealing as those in the Arab Gulf region, there are some areas for further oil and gas exploration, particularly in the southern part of the country. And perhaps as important as those traditional hydrocarbons, there also is a lot of interest here in renewables. And we've seen in recent months a lot of interest on the part of the government of Tunisia and some on the part of the private sector in pursuing opportunities in renewables, whether that's wind or solar. There also are some export-oriented sectors that are very good investment opportunities right now, particularly on things like call centers, aeronautics, the automotive part business, and textiles. And the Tunisian government has and is going to be improving some of the incentives that they have in place to attract investment in these fields. Agribusiness is another area for investment, and there has been, I think, a lot of focus on the part of our Tunisian colleagues in what they can do to up their game to move up the value chain, particularly in areas like olive oil. And, of course, tourism. The tourism industry has been a major part of the Tunisian economy in recent decades, but there is a recognition that they need to diversify that tourism sector, and they need to also reform and modernize key parts of it, especially in the hotel industry. So for those of you who are either interested in or have experience in the hospitality and tourism sector, Tunisia is definitely an area you should be looking at. Finally, before I turn it over to Khalid, I did want to mention the Tunisia 2020 Investment Conference. That's going to happen very end of November, November 29 and 30 here in Tunis. And this is in support of Tunisia's economic and social and sustainable development goals. This conference is going to definitely bring together a very impressive and high-powered group of international political decision makers, of investors, and Tunisia's economic partners. So it's going to provide some really good and important networking opportunities. We expect our Tunisian partners to present their 2016 to 20 development plan, and we also expect our Tunisian hosts to focus on some of the recent reforms that they have made in the legal and the regulatory environment, especially in investment and public-private partnerships. Our Tunisian hosts are going to try to drum up some interest in some particular large public sector projects and try to use some of those new tools in PPPs to attract investment. And they're going to probably, most importantly, describe to all of us what steps they are implementing to simplify and investment procedures and support private investors as they look at Tunisia. So, of course, we have an entire economic and commercial section here at your disposal. We'll talk a little bit about how you can reach them in a minute. I think their links are up on the screen. or we will come back to them. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to my good friend Khalid Babu, the president of AmCham. Khalid, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think you said it all. What I'm going to add is just about the AmCham, the American Chamber in Tunisia. We are created since 1989, and I think we are really well recognized by the business community, and we have more than 1,500 members. And we also are really involved with the preparation of this big conference that will be at the end of this month. And in connection with your commercial and economic section, we will try to give help, assistance, and support to any company, American company registered, and then Tunisia with logistic, especially with the logistic and welcome. Moreover, AmCham is connected with, of course, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, since we have an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce, but also we are connected with the UTAC and ISUA. So any company that needs more details or logistic hearing tools or from hearing tools, please feel free to contact us, and welcome.
Well, thank you. And now we will start taking your questions. So if you type them in the box that you'll see. We will read the questions out as they come up, and then we will have the ambassador or a member of the team answer that question.
The first question is, how safe is Tunisia for U.S. citizens visiting for business or tourism?
Sure. Well, I'd be happy to take that question. There have been some security challenges here in Tunisia. Everybody knows that. There were some tragic attacks which occurred particularly in 2015. And, of course, there have been unfortunate attacks in many other parts of North Africa and Europe. Those are challenges which we all must deal with, whether here in Tunisia or beyond. Those attacks didn't focus or target U.S. citizens. But, of course, if you're at the wrong place or wrong time, it doesn't really matter what your nationality is. But while Tunisia and other countries in the Middle East or North Africa or Europe deal with these threats of terrorism, it's important to focus on the mitigations. And we are very impressed by what our Tunisian friends have done in the last couple of years to improve their security capabilities so that they can detect and analyze and deter the threats which they face and which Tunisia's guests face. And of course, the United States is a leading partner for Tunisia in providing defense and security capabilities and services. Those are, in fact, good opportunities for our friends in the private sector who have the best quality defense security goods and services to offer. But this is a country that regularly welcomes U.S. travelers, whether they're business travelers or tourists. And, of course, we want our U.S. visitors, our American citizens, to take the normal precautions that they would when traveling around this part of the world. We do have a lot of information up at travel.state.gov that describes some of those precautions that you should take. But we do think that there are important business and other opportunities to pursue here, and we welcome all of our fellow American citizens to come on board.
Okay, second question. When it comes to doing business in Tunisia, from the regulatory standpoint, how long does it take to register an LLC in Tunisia, and what sort of capital is needed for this?
Okay, I can take that. Registering a U.S. business in Tunisia, depending specifically on the sector, but offshore businesses can register their companies for a whole process of about 5 days, 6 days. When they need to operate on the local market, then the process is a bit longer than that. Per the World Bank estimation, depending again on the sector, it's sometimes between 2 weeks and a month.
Another question, when it comes to the investment code, people have read about that in the news. What are the benefits from this code for investors? What can you tell us about what effect the investment code will have on U.S. investors?
Yeah, hi, this is Catherine Kaiser, the economic chief here. The investment code was very hard fought for Tunisia. There's a lot of thought put into it. It's been years in the making. And the government's undoing a lot of previously closed, non-competitive regulatory environment and opening it back up to investment. Part of that is prioritizing certain sectors, so giving more incentives to companies who want to come and invest here. It's also trying to streamline the the regulatory environment, so they're going to start a one-stop shop within the government to make it easier to register the business and hopefully take down those numbers that Sammy just mentioned with the time it takes to register. It's also going to reduce regulatory procedures for opening businesses, so it's going to reduce the number of government authorizations, for example, so that companies can register more quickly and with less bureaucracy.
Great. When it comes to projects on power generation in Tunisia, are you talking about fossil fuel generation or renewables?
That as well. It's actually both of those things are being discussed. So Tunisia has seen about a 5% increase year on year in consumption of power. So the government's looking for help in both directions. They have a goal of raising the percentage of energy produced domestically by renewable resources to 30% by 2030. By 2030. So there are opportunities for both of you who are to come here and invest.
And a follow-up question to that, could you describe the renewable energy sector in general? What is the interest in renewable energy, and what is the mix? Is it solar, PV, wind?
I have the whole list here. So it's going to be solar power plants, strengthening works, connector of irrigated areas, Sus Monastir, which is one of the center of the city, coastal zone development for green economy, ecosystem development projects, natural resources management program in vulnerable rural areas, and agriculture integrated development projects. They're all on the website of the investment conference.
I would add to that the new Minister of Energy has very deep experience both in the financial field as well as in climate issues and the green economy. So I think that her being in place as the new minister provides a unique opportunity for people in the renewables field, and I think in general a far more knowledgeable and open set of partners with whom to work as people pursue opportunities in that field.
Okay, we have several questions on the new government, which has been in power for a few months. What is your take on their economic policies, and what do you see for the future?
Sure. Well, firstly, the new government is led by a dynamic Prime Minister, Youssef Chahed. He's probably the youngest Prime Minister right now in the entire Arab world, and I think he and some of his team have served to really inject some dynamism into governance here, into the Tunisian government. He has put up at the top of his list trying to restart the economic engine here in Tunisia. He has focused on some key areas, not only in terms of implementing some of these new reforms like the investment code, but also working on the macroeconomic balances of the country. Right now, there's some good open debate happening here in Tunisia about the 2017 budget, about some of the tough choices which Tunisia has to make in terms of its public sector wage bills and other issues. But it seems to me that Prime Minister Chahed and his team are trying to tackle those economic challenges head on, that they have the right people with the right backgrounds in economics, in the private sector, in finance. So far, we're impressed with the attention that our Tunisian government colleagues are injecting into the economy, and of course they want to tackle that unemployment, and they want to see both domestic and foreign investment start to flow at greater speed.
A question on healthcare. How would you describe the current system and infrastructure, and what kind of opportunities are there for American companies in the healthcare sector?
The healthcare industry, the healthcare infrastructure is adequate in Tunisia. You will see that during the investment conference, many projects in building new hospitals will be announced, and there will be a need in equipment and, of course, for medical devices.
Great. In the security field, we've heard some reports about security programs being set aside for certain countries, certain providers. The example given by the questioner is about a border project that was set aside for German suppliers. What can you tell us about your efforts to facilitate similar agreements for American companies?
Sure. I don't have all the details at my fingertips right now, but I'm not aware that there are set-asides per se. I know that key countries are providing financing to the Tunisian government to finance some of the country's large defense and security projects. I think the questioner mentioned one in particular, namely that which is an ambitious border security project to strengthen the security of the Tunisia-Libya border. And the United States is a significant contributor to that project and is going to be implementing it. And Germany also is participating in that. But I'm not positive that there are particular set-asides for companies that will eventually be chosen to supply those goods and services.
A question for AmCham President. How would you describe the U.S.-Tunisian relationship? What is Tunisia doing to attract U.S. businesses to Tunisia?
Actually, we are doing a lot because many businesses, U.S. businesses, are in Europe. And we are really, as a government, I'm not talking about the private sector, but the government working a lot with U.S. businesses that have headquarters in Europe. Now, concerning the U.S. businesses that are in the U.S., our agreement with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce make us a little bit having some presence in the U.S. We have also a commercial and economic attaché at our embassy there. But since we signed the Joint Economic Commission between the U.S. government and the Tunisian government, we have all fields, 3 fields that we are both government working on with the help of the private sector. And we, as AmCham, were selected as the private sector leader. And we are working closely with our friends in terms of agribusiness, in ICT, in education, human resources. And we try to give some help for the US companies to try to invest or to discover more the Tunisian economy.
Another question about distribution in Tunisia. Oftentimes, business relationships rely on mature distribution networks. Can you describe distribution networks in Tunisia and the infrastructure that exists here?
Generally speaking, distribution networks are relatively developed here in Tunisia. We have hypermarkets, we have wholesalers, and a whole network of distributors all over the country. In terms of also of a franchising as a kind of sort of distribution as well. The sector is now getting open to foreign franchises to operate in the market, and so far during the last 2 or 3 years we have about 10 US franchises already operating in the market. So the market is still absorbing. It has a big potential, and it's getting developed in a good way.
With respect to the aviation sector, what opportunities do you see for supplying aircraft in Tunisia?
Well, in terms of supplying aircraft in Tunisia currently, we are not aware of any opportunities. However, for the supply chain, we know that there are opportunities. In fact, on the 21st of this month, we will be having a DVC exactly on this aspect to introduce U.S. manufacturers to potential partners that they can have here in Tunisia. And we hope you can join us at the end of this conference. We will have more information. If you write to us, we can get you more information about that sector.
Great. There's a question about regional competition. Obviously, there are opportunities in Egypt and Morocco. Why would investors want to target Tunisia in particular?
I'd be happy to take that. Of course, I'm biased because I work and I live here in Tunis, and I happen to think that Tunis is a very strong look for a few reasons. Firstly, is because of what we think is the inherent stability that democracy has brought to this country. There was a revolution here, and more importantly, there has been several changes of government here, and this is basically a stable, emerging democracy. And I think business businesses want to invest in those places where they think that broader environment is actually flexible, is stable, is democratic, and is not subject to very violent changes that non-democratic societies have. So I think in the first instance, that would be one. I think also Tunisia, perhaps as much if not more than the other two countries that were mentioned, has a very skilled workforce which has a lot of experience working with the international economy and working overseas. So Tunisia may be overrepresented when you go to Europe or when you go to other parts of the Middle East. You see a lot of that middle management and high-end talent. Those are Tunisians. So I think the human factor sets them apart. And lastly, of course, the geography. Although Morocco is close to Europe, and so is Egypt, that proximity between the key Tunisian ports and Europe just on the other side of the Med really makes Tunisia quite competitive. So I would argue that those are three things that make Tunisia special and do call for an extra special one. I'm not sure Khalid might want to jump in.
And there is also some incentives to invest here in Tunisia for foreign companies, not only in taxation, but also in providing the land, providing other things for at least 10 years. So there is also a big incentive to invest here in Tunisia.
And if I might just add one more thing, and that is going back to the issue of Libya. Although Egypt borders Libya, and Libya does have a lot of commercial paths with some countries in Europe, particularly Italy and Malta, I think the Tunisians actually do set themselves in terms of having a very broad range of the Tunisian economy, whether in agribusiness, whether in light manufacturing, or whether in finance, who have years-long experience doing business in Libya and, frankly, succeeding in Libya. So I think for those who are looking at pursuing opportunities in Libya now and in the future, Tunisia, I think, does really stand out as a place to set up shop.